Welcome everyone to our live stream for the Deshka Fire. We're going to get started here in a couple minutes. We are gathering everyone to go ahead and start. So thanks for joining us and thank you for your patience.
So we'll get started here. We'll just wait for the folks back there to sit down and then we'll get started. So I want to welcome everybody here this afternoon. Thank you so much. I know a Sunday is sometimes a little tougher to come out to, but obviously this is an important meeting for you folks. We also have McKinley that will be joining us afterwards, so we'll do our presentation. And what we want to do is make sure that we answer all your questions, but we want to hold those to the very end. So as you see, we have lots of maps around the room. We have firefighters who have been working out in the field, and we want to make sure that you get everything answered. So my name is Josie Williams. I am the one of three public information officers for the Dishka Landing Fire. And I just want to say that we got a lot of phone calls, people talking to us, and it's really refreshing to see the cooperation and just the camaraderie in facing this issue in your community. So we thank you for that. So I want to start out by introducing our Incident Commander, Al Lawson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming on a Sunday afternoon. I really appreciate it. So just a few things about Team 10. We're from the Pacific Northwest. The majority of us come from Oregon and Washington. We're a interagency team, so there are folks from all agencies on our team, state, federal, county, etc. And we're honored to be here. We were asked to come up here to support fire activities in Alaska. We've been watching closely the activities you guys have up here, and we realize that you've been busy. Historic fire up here this year. I'm incredibly impressed about how dry it is and how bad the situation has been up here for you guys. So we were asked to come up here to support, and we are doing just that. We're supporting all of your local firefighters out there. We have quite a number of local firefighters, both state, county, etc., that are currently working on our fire. And again, here we're here to help and bolster, not to take over the fire. And we're very grateful for the work that the folks locally have done out there. When we picked up this fire, there had been a ton of hard work already done for us. I said they set the table nicely for us to succeed on this. And we are. We've made great progress, and I'll let the operations section talk to you about that progress. In addition, we've been coordinating the McKinley fire as well. They have provided us resources and have been very helpful, and we're doing this jointly. That helps us to economize and utilize resources appropriately. There's no sense in me ordering things. I make a quick call to their incident commander, and we're able to share those resources, which is incredibly efficient as well. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Josie.
So I'll just let the microphone go down the path here. You can introduce yourself. This is our fire behavior specialist.
Good afternoon. Forrest Owenby, Fire Behavior Analyst with Team 10. And so I kind of have a theme that I'm going to talk about here. It's kind of got three phases. It's why are we here? Why did we come? Why are we here? And how long are we going to be here? And you might have had some of these questions answered earlier. This is my first time out for the public meetings and that. But as we go into it, you can actually bring that up. Thanks. As we get into it a little bit, there's things about fire, and I'm a fire behavior analyst with the team. And so my job is to kind of gather what the fire is going to do and then pass that information on to our operations, to our safety officers, and try to keep personnel safe out there on the fire. And then also meet with you guys and try to let you know some questions that you might have as well. So I look at it, try to figure out how fast the fire is going to go, how tall the flames are going to be, and those types of things. And I also look at what it's burning in. And so there's different things that brought us here. And so one of the things that brought us here is from June 10th to right now, this area has had about 1.7 inches of rain, which is very minimal amounts. So the area has not received that moisture, that precipitation, to help those fuels and everything else grow and to stay green and everything else. And so they've dried. And when those fuels dry, then they're more receptive to fire and can burn. The other thing is on August 18th, you guys had a north wind coming down this valley, and it was very strong. And once that fire got started out there, all these fuels that are out there are really dry. And there's kind of a couple things that'll drive fire. And on the screen here, you can kind of see topography, the terrain, is one of the environmental factors that will influence how fire will spread. The other is the weather, and the last is the fuels. Well, the topography out here is pretty flat, but there's rolling hills and some little terrain differences. And so it doesn't have that steep pitch for a fire to start at the bottom and just run uphill. Fire does the opposite of what water does, right? Water will come down and it flows downhill. Fire is going to start at the base of a hill, heats itself, and it'll go up. Well, you don't have that influence out here, but in just minimal spots. So the driving factor on the 18th was that wind that came through. And it was 20 miles an hour plus at some of the raw sites. So as that came through, a fire got started out there. And guess what? You got that spruce that's out there, and a lot of it is dead and dying. It's laying on the ground. And so that fuel is a source. And if the fire gets into it, it wants to elevate, or it wants to climb a ladder. It wants to climb up into the trees. When it climbs up, then it throws those embers out, and they go flying on out, and then they land back out on the ground. When they land on the ground, then they start new little spots out there, and it keeps that fire spreading. When the wind's blowing, it gets the direction where it's going to go. And so it just keeps feeding that fire and putting new fire out in front of itself, and it allows it to just keep going and going and going. On that day, what happened was that wind pushed it. The resources, you guys had air tankers and everything else out there working on it, and they did a fantastic job at corralling it and kind of narrowing it down. Now, other features out there that help to narrow it down as well is some topography, and some of those topography features have also made it very difficult. You got swamps, you got lakes, you got a lot of area with no road or access, right? So as that fire goes out there, it wants to burn up too some of those swamps, and then it kind of stops. But it doesn't mean it goes out, because it's still burning in the ground layers. And I got a piece that I'll show you a little bit later here about some of those fuels, because those are really dry at this time of the year right now. And that is kind of leading us into, why are we still here? It's because those fuels are really dry. I have an indice over here, and we can go to that next page, Alan. I have an indice up over here, and I'll talk about it. It's a Canadian fire indice, and it just talks a little bit about some of the indexes and codes that we use to determine. And some of this FFMC is a fine fuel. So it's like the needles, the grasses that are laying on the ground out there. And those things are burning on the top. Well, those grasses that are dead or matted down will burn real easy, and they dry out really fast. So they light, and that's what lights the fire and starts it spreading. But what holds the fire is that duff and then the drought code. And those kind of keep going down into the ground, and that holds the fire there longer and longer and longer, and keeps it going. And so some of those things keep helping that fire sit there and hanging on, and all of that other areas where it's at makes it difficult for us in that terrain stuff. Another feature that you guys have that's going on this year, and I think you can just drive around and look in the fuels, the birch. All of it looks like it's fall, late fall. It's got a leaf miner that has attacked it, and now all these leaves are turning brown and dying and everything else. Guess what? When it's brown and drying like this, it's an available fuel source. It will burn. And not only are they falling off the trees and landing on the ground, that's where the embers will land and it'll light them. It spreads right through it. But also when it's sitting up in the tree canopy and it goes up the tree, then it gets into the canopy and starts throwing these leaves out in front too. And then there are embers that will actually light that fire and spread it as well, right? So we have those and all of that problem. And it is vast. Part of it's probably from the drought, stressed the birch a little bit, and then the miner attacked, and now it's causing all of these leaves. So it's another fuel source that's out there that's feeding it. So we have that. You know, and so then we're looking at how long are we going to be here? You know, that's when are we going to leave? Well, I don't know that when we're going to leave, but when is the fire going to be done? And pretty much with these conditions and the drought and everything else, it's not going to be until almost snow flies that this fire really goes out. Or a heavy, heavy dose of rain. Because in that ground, I brought a piece of the fire with me. You can kind of see how it burnt. And as you look, the top layer is all those fine fuels. The grasses are on the top. Then that duff layer is this first inch or so. And then as I keep going down, that's organic matter still down in here, 4 inches down into this sod. Well, that's burnable until you get down to dirt. So all of that with that drought code is still holding fire, and it lingers out there, and it lingers out there, and then it starts spreading through some of the grass. And when it hits some of that dead down, what is it going to do? It's going to climb up, right? And it's going to lift up into there. What's going to change this moisture in this soil down here? Heavy, heavy doses of rain, right? So what we're waiting for is that next rainstorm to come in and get into it and actually really put a hurt on this fire, right? To put it out. Now, the resources are doing a great job of knocking a lot of that stuff out. The other thing is there's a lot of resources here. So like the first day when the fire took off, resources weren't all here, were they? But now the resources are close, and they're already deployed out there as well. So if something picks up, the odds are a lot higher to catch that, and that's getting into the operation part for Stan, who's going to be coming up next. So I will be over by that sign if you have questions about the CF, the Canadian Forest Fire Danger Rating System, and you wanted more information on that. Next up is Stan.
Thanks, Forrest. Stan Jacobson, one of the operations section chiefs with Northwest Team 10. Next slide. Okay, for those of you here that were here the other day, you probably recognize this map. You probably noticed that some of the lines aren't near as straight, and it looks like maybe the fire shrank. That's due to better mapping. There we go. You see this black line is actually the fire edge. Same with this little line going here, it goes up and down. Looks like a worm crawled across there with a crayon. That's actually the fire edge. Some of this down here is still our estimate of the fire edge until we actually get out there and get a line in with a GPS. And I could explain that more later up close, but that's kind of why that looks a little different. Okay, we also break the fire into manageable sizes. In this case, we have Division Alpha and Division Zulu. These little symbols here on the lower end of the map and up north are division break symbols. So this is Division Alpha, this side's Division Zulu, okay? We also have a Division Lima, which is down here along the lake, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So in Division Alpha, this white area here with looks like the little blue dots in it, that's kind of the general swamp location. The fuels out in here are generally the grasses that burn real rapidly. From the origin of the fire up here on the north, that first night it burned pretty rapidly through the swamp, or the grasses on top of the swamp, and down into the timber, and then it just sort of skunked around when it hit the timber. Some of this came through a little further and burned further south toward Red Shirt Lake, which is down here. Okay, so Division Zulu from H10. H designates a helispot for us where we can get folks in, people in, equipment in. That's where you see the H10, H30, all these little H's, those are helispots. So from H10 to H30, we've had a crew up there the last couple of days walking the fire edge and mopping up and gritting to the 30+ foot mark. Okay, that doesn't mean we've put out the fire. That just means we've been there, checked 30+ feet. That fire edge is pretty cold in there. From H30 down, this black line is actually a saw line, followed up with a hose line, and they started some mop-up work in there with water. So we called this the black line of controlled fire edge. We feel pretty comfortable about, saying the fire is not going to spread on the ground in that black line area. This little hash marks here, yesterday we have had a couple of excavators come in to help us out, and I've got some slides later that'll explain why we chose to use some excavators in some areas to help us build some fire line through this really thick stuff down in here. So they did a little bit of work in there yesterday and made great progress so far today, last report. All right, so that kind of covers Alpha. We've had folks from division break to division break on the ground and slowly working south. And it seems like you're chunking along, and all of a sudden you're there. So they're making great progress down there in Division Alpha today. Division Zulu, we'll start up here at the top from H10 to Gannett Spike. We've actually got all our crews are out on the fire, and we consider them spiked out. We have a spike camp here at Raleigh Lake Campground. We have 3 fly-in spike camps. We have a Gannett Spike, that's just the name of the crew. So we call it Gannett Spike, Medford Spike, and TCC Spike. I don't know if you can read that right there. Yeah, right there. So all the crews, resources that they need, food, water, hose, saw gas, any replacement parts have to be flown in to these 3 locations. This particular spike we can drive in, that's pretty handy. Okay, so from Gannett Spike to H10, it's same type of terrain as it is over on the other side. We've got crews in there taking a look at that fire edge, and the fire edge looks pretty good, but out in the swamp there's some spruce stringers, little patches of timber that are holding quite a bit of heat. So we're going out a little bit further along that particular edge to get some of those spruce stringers, knock the heat out of that in case we get some winds from the north. We could possibly put an ember over the line up in this general area here. Okay, so from Gannett Spike to Medford Spike, we're kind of getting into more of a timber type. So that's kind of a little slower going. Once again, saw line followed up by a hose line, followed up by people on the hose mopping in. And we're working for that 30 feet. Now that's not a hard and fast 30 feet. Some places 30 feet, some places 10 feet, some places 60 feet. But we're working for, what we're looking for is what's appropriate to stop the spread of that ground fire. Okay. So from Medford Spike to the TCC Spike, see how that line squiggles all around? It may only be a mile as the crow flies between those 2, but you probably have 4 miles of line. So that takes a long time to cut that, a lot of hose to drag to get all those spots. And that's why you look at it and go, geez, how come those guys aren't doing anything out there? Well, that's a lot of real estate. And then back up and down with hose and to cover that and to get that secured 30 feet, right? Okay, so from TCC Spike, we've got a crew working down, and they've made last night they were about to this location. Last report, they were somewhere along here. I believe there's a lake right in there. They've made it pretty close to the lake with their hand line. So that's good progress. That's great progress for how thick that stuff is. And then from here on down, we've had folks scouting line for not only the excavator to work, but also for where the crews to go. Usually have somebody ahead of you scout line to see where you want to put that, make it in the best location. Okay, that pretty much covers the main fire down here in Lima. Our goal is to get from the southern tip of this fire 3 miles south down the lake and take care of structure preparation on those homes and cabins down along the lake. And with the exception of just a little bit of supplies that we need to finish up that, we have met that goal. So from the south end of that fire, approximately 3 miles down the lake, those structures have been prepped. And what I mean by that is they have hose around them, sprinkler set up, pumps already set up, ready to go, some defensible space made where we could, and they've been working really hard down there in that area. Okay, that's about it for this part of the deal. I'll be around this evening afterwards to look at these maps. There's a map over here and a map on the wall to ask any more specific questions that you folks have. Also got a couple of pictures that kind of explain what's going on. This is a crew at one of the spike locations, dropped off by the helicopter. You can see behind them there's a pile of gear. These guys just got dropped off and are getting out of the way so the helicopter can take off and get some more stuff for them. This is a couple folks setting up a sling load. See another sling load there and another one there. These all get picked up with a helicopter, slung out to those folks. And this is just, there's a couple slides in here to show you kind of how thick the stuff is, although you guys probably are more aware of that than we are. It's, some of the spots are pretty rough going. So, this is, they're cutting a saw line or a P line, so they can get in there and get a hose and walk back and forth a little easier. This is a crew, yes, we get a break every now and then. It's pretty hot and nasty work, so good job, folks. So a shot of a guy digging. Forrest was talking about getting down to mineral soil. This is really tough. A lot of times we can do what we call a dry mop without water. If the soil's wet down below that duff, we can dig up some of that dirt and mix in with the organics and get that. This is really, really tough to do, not only because of the thick duff layer, because everything's so dry. You can see he's just kind of making dust there. So that's why we're trying to get a hose lay around this thing and get water on it. It's our version of forest rain cloud. But that's just a picture of some of the stuff. You see all the snags that come down, the shallow roots. That also creates a hazard for the firefighters. Once we get away from that saw line, we've got to have folks in there cutting some of these trees that could come down and injure the folks that are out there working, and that's a slow process also. This happens to be an aerial shot of this red shirt lake there, looking from the north to the south. See little duffers along the edge, a little bit of heat there on the south end. That's pretty typical of what we're seeing. You know, little areas are skunking around, and you get a little hot spot, and we're working there, we're getting there. But that's a pretty good shot and represented what we got out there. And that's it. I'll be around for questions later. Next up is Ed.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Ed Soto. I'm with the Division of Forestry, and I'm the agency administrator for both this Deshka fire and the McKinley fire up north. So I'm going to start with a little bit of kind of a raise your hands if and some information here. So first of all, who here is interested in the McKinley fire? Anybody? Thanks, Tom. Tom is the deputy IC for the McKinley fire, so he's got a vested interest in what happens there. And then, so you're all here for the Deshka, and who here has been to one of these meetings before? Okay, so a number of you have seen myself and the team before. That's great. Thanks for coming. So I want to talk a little bit about the team. So early on this fire, when it started to develop, we immediately knew that it was going to be, not immediately, but pretty quickly we knew it was going to be a bigger fire than our initial attack forces were going to be able to contain. So we ordered up a Type 2 team. It was very fortunate because when this incident started, or when the wind event kicked up, and we saw our initial attack activity kicked up, we ordered this team to be pre-positioned in Anchorage in case we were to need them. And before they ever got there, I ordered them up to this fire specifically. So the Type 2 team is a very capable team. There's a number of those teams, to include 2 of them here in Alaska that are throughout the nation that respond to these incidents. So it's, I guess I say that to the extent that we know the seriousness of this fire. We know what you have invested in your homes and your values around this fire. We take that very seriously, and that's why this team is here. I have a lot of confidence in what they're doing. I really appreciate that. Myself, I'm a Matsu Valley resident. I've been here over 20 years. I'm your neighbor. I've worked here. I understand what this valley is like, the conditions in the valley. I live, work, and play here. So, you know, my home is here too, so I'm treating your homes kind of like I would treat my home. You know, It's a value at risk, and I take that seriously too. So I'm representing the state and managing these fires on behalf of the Division of Forestry. So another thing I want to touch on is some of the closures we got in place in relation to this fire. State Parks has closed the Nancy Lakes Rec area. That remains closed today. Our primary objective here is the protection of the public and the protection of our firefighters. So when we close these areas, it's basically to keep you safe and to keep our firefighters safe. We don't want our firefighters to be distracted in any way. We want them to be focused on this fire so we can get it out and we can get everybody back to thinking about other things. The other closures we have in place, and I've got a map right back there, are the state land closure around the fire under the authority of the state forester to close state lands for wildland fire danger. And on that same footprint, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game has closed all hunting in that area too. So essentially we've got, on the order of about 200 firefighters surrounding that fire area working hard, and the last thing we need is them to be concerned about who's going where, and four-wheelers and shooting and that kind of thing. And I love to hunt. I love to hunt. In fact, I'm anxious for this fire to go out so I can start hunting myself. But we certainly don't want that conflict in the fire area. Good news today for those of you that will be traveling up and down the Parks Highway. It's not necessarily related to this fire, but it's definitely something near and dear to our Alaskan hearts, is the Parks Highway is open to two-way traffic as of today. So that's excellent news. Speed limit sitting right around 45 miles an hour. And I think that is it all I have. So I'll hand it back to the PIO, and if I need to take questions later, we'll open that up at some point.
Thank you, Ed. So I don't see Ken Barkley. Are you here?
So let me talk for Ken a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I do want to talk for the Matsu Borough. Mr. Barkley is the Matsu Borough Director of Emergency Services. He couldn't be here today, but I've got to tell you that the Division of Forestry, we so appreciate the borough and the partnership that we have with the borough. Anything we need, they get us. All the volunteer fire departments, the borough's firefighting equipment and personnel. I mean, we've just come together and they've been so helpful. So amazing partnership with the borough, amazing partnership with all the other agencies in the area. I've got to hand it to State Parks. State Parks has absolutely been fantastic. They've given up their law enforcement officers to help us, and it's been a great partnership. So with that, I'll hand it back to you again.
And I don't see the mayor here anywhere? No? Okay, so one of the PIOs that we have has done an excellent job here. We definitely need people out in the field. Sometimes, you look at my age, a little difficult to get out there these days, but we have people that are equipped to do that. So Mike, you can introduce yourself, and this is one of the PIOs that we have that has actually been in the field taking pictures of the work so we could put them on all our social media sites and also present them here today so you really have an idea of what is actually taking place out there. So here you go, Mike.
Thank you, Josie. My name is Mike McMillan. I'm a public information officer from Boise, Idaho. I spent 17 years up here as an Alaska smoke jumper, so I have a lot of care and compassion for Alaska and its people, and a lot of fire experience. So that's why they call me up here to try to get in the field and to show you folks what it looks like when we fight these fires. And so we've got a few pictures that I'll briefly put verbal captions to. And so we have local firefighters here that bring a lot of that experience along with crews from the Pacific Northwest, like the Pineville Hotshots, they're here. But the Gannett Glacier Hotshots, they're here working on the west flank of this fire. We have the Tanana Chiefs crew, which is a crew of Native Alaskans, and they're here as well. So we'll see if we can. Here's one of the Primeville hot shots. They're just she's just spraying one of the hot spots out there. So you see they cut down the trees so that they can get in there and spray around it so that fire cannot spread anymore. And this gentleman is cutting a spruce bough. Now the Alaska crews have what we call swatters. They can swat the flames, plastic handle beater tools like flappers. But when you don't have that, you can improvise. And so he's cutting an improvised spruce bough. And you'll see in the next slide how those are used. So when fire is creeping up a tree, hard to put that out with a shovel before the saw gets in there. So a spruce bough works to do that. So the saw can come in behind and cut that tree down without having to dealing with flames. We have 3 helicopters assigned, is that correct? 3 helicopters assigned, and this is one of them landing at night. They fly until the sun goes down. They're working all day. And one of our pilots is Abby Amboni, and here's a shot of her delivering a all-terrain vehicle from the field, and also a load of supplies. So she's quite a good helicopter pilot, and she's also an Alaska-based pilot and resident. Unmanned aerial systems, or drones, they're not all bad. You know, our message has always been, if you fly, we can't. But we're flying our unmanned aerial systems to give firefighters and the managers an idea of what the fire line looks like and where the hot spots and spot fires may be. When a fire comes through raging in the wind, it throws a lot of fires out ahead of itself, and those are difficult to find when we hit the line and the flames have subsided. So that these are extremely effective tools now, and I'd be here a long time if I told you their capabilities, but they can also conduct burning operations, larger machines than this. So the operator on the left, these are both Alaska smoke jumpers. You have the operator on the left and the visual observer on the right, and they're in touch with the Air Operations Branch, and all the air traffic is all coordinated together, so we make sure that these drones don't affect any of our air operations. And then it's relayed, the information is relayed to cell phones. So you can see there's hot spots being shown on that screen there. A couple of jumpers heading down to Red Shirt Lake. This is the mode of transportation they're using to get there, so it's not a bad way to travel. Looks like fun. Dirty hands and taking the weather. The weather is something we watch constantly, and the wind is especially our greatest concern. Morning briefing at the staging area at the Deshka Landing Fire. This is at the end of the road. Working closely with the division supervisor here is Gil Frank. Gilbert is the supervisor of the Tanana Chiefs crew. That's a Native Alaskan, primarily Native Alaskan crew. And they're doing a great job out there in that zigzaggy portion of the fire. A lot of hard work. And this is some of that. As you saw before, they have to clear the brush and the trees before we can get in there with our hoses, and that's what they're doing there. Now we have an excavator, 2 of them working in there, and you can see this area is pretty close to the health spot that we fly out of, and the hardwoods, the birch and aspen have been compromised not just by the drought, but now by the fire. So those weakened roots caused these trees to fall. So this eliminates some of that hazard for our firefighters. And you can see this hazard tree on the left. It's burnt out almost completely on the side. That tree is about 70 feet tall, and it's an extreme hazard to any crews working in the area. So, last slide is this is the last slide. The sawyer there is following the tree. You see, he's not wearing his backpack, and that is for safety. So he doesn't need a 40-pound anchor on his back when he has to egress or leave that tree area when it starts to fall. So that's a lot of the work that's going on now, and thank you very much.
So I just want to, Kathy, raise your hand. So Kathy Kramer came to us, I understand that she was doing Firewise, and that's certainly something that we really think is important, whether you're doing it now or you're doing it in the future. but she will have handouts at the back there. Evidently, she's been doing the FireWise program in this community since 2006. And, you know, the last thing you want to do is wait till the last minute. You know, I've been doing that for years in my own fire department. And, you know, it's best to prepare yourself and give yourself a better chance of your home making it through any kind of fire situation. I just want to thank everybody again. We'll have the folks from McKinley speak, and then, like I said, we'll break out into the post. We have pictures up here so you can get a better idea of some of the work that's being done. And we'll have folks that have been out in the field. You have a couple minutes here that you need to have there?
Josie, did you want to take questions? I mean,
we'll wait till afterwards.
Okay.
Yep, we'll wait till afterwards so we can have people one-on-one. Yes? Somebody has a key lockout?
White Toyota?
Okay. That was good. So one of the things, this is my second time to Alaska. I came in 2003. We were on the Toke Fire. And, you know, with our team, and I am separate to this team, but we work very closely together all the time. We kind of share resources. And so when my team came up here, I think it was in June, I was not able to come, and I was so excited to find out that I could come with this team. And the Incident Commander used to be on my team, so we worked together for 14 years, so it's just a pleasure. Folks are just real receptive, helpful. You know, it's good to see, you know, folks taking care of each other. And I live in an area that is a little remote, you know, at times. And like I said, neighbors helping neighbors, that's always good to see.
I can go, Josie, while they're...
There you go, good.
Okay.
Stop me from talking.
All right. All right, good afternoon. Tom Kurth, Deputy Incident Commander with the McKinley Fire. I have a similar background as this team that's here, up from the Pacific Northwest. I've sat down there as IC in his seat or their seat. Certainly thank you for a great presentation. It's always nice to see pictures like that so you can actually visualize what's going on behind the scenes and what takes place in these long shifts and these firefighters that are just working extremely hard in these conditions here. So great presentation there. I'll give you a brief update on the McKinley Fire. That started a week ago Saturday, right, and then certainly progressed the following Sunday into what is about an 8-mile corridor down the Parks Highway, and we lost 51 structures during that, 3 commercial buildings, and still have an evacuation order under that territory there. But we have been doing the best we can to get things somewhat normalized there. Opening the highway was a big deal today. We have power established in about a little over half of that. We'll be stringing wires over the Parks Highway tomorrow. That activity will be taking place, and we'll also be reevaluating our evacuation orders and what looks like, once we get borough approval here, repopulating the areas and letting people go back to their homes or their areas that were homes, so we can get started on recovery here. The fire itself is about 3,362 acres, something like that. We have 450 people working on that. We still have another 5 crews coming in, so that's another 100 individuals coming in to supplement that. We're also bringing in feller bunchers. This is logging equipment that we're going to try and take some of this fallen timber out of there and clean that up some, take some of that off the right-of-way, so that's going to be a big deal doing that. Those are big pieces of equipment that you know, you want to stay clear of. They're swinging back and forth, have big saws on the end of them, so that activity is going to be taking place. We have about 28 miles of perimeter on this fire, and we're showing about 28% containment. So of that 28 miles, about 28% of it is contained. And that means as fire managers or firefighters, we do not believe that that fire will move outside of that line. We call it black line as opposed to the red line. Red line is uncontained perimeter, and so that's what we're trying to establish right now, is get this 100% contained. and that'll be taking place through the week here. So good progress being made under these conditions, which are hot and dry. We don't see any break in the weather all the way through the week here. And so we'll be operating under those conditions and still trying to so-called normalize places, and that means we'll be working out there while individuals are working in their subdivision. So that's going to be sort of a coexistence, and we're asking you to be very careful in those places. You know, probably the most dangerous place we have used to be the highway. Now it's going to be these individual places that have burned down in some form or fashion there. Ash pits, I don't know, we got something like between us, Swan Lake, and Deshka here, we almost, I don't know, we have like 6, 7 burn injuries from people stepping into ash pits. And those are firefighters that know what they're doing, so the public itself is at risk too and operating around their own homes, because they're hard to see, they're kind of camouflage. You step in there, they're hard to get out of, you put your hands down in them, and then we get burned injuries as a result of that. In addition, there's power lines down in there, so you want to treat every power line like it is live, and they continue to re-energize there, so that too will be taking place. And so again, hazardous materials, ash pits, heavy equipment, traffic, this is all you know, what we're looking for is this coexistence and everybody being very careful out there while we repopulate in this area. And so you know, again, we'll be getting another 100 individuals in there, so more traffic in here. And I'm just going to lean on a week from now, where the first models of a change in the weather are out there. And that's a low probability, and our forecasters would, they'd cringe if they knew I was even letting that out. But, you know, that means maybe a little cooler, possibly even a little rain out there, but that's a week out. And usually our forecasters are somewhat hesitant to even lean any probabilities on that. Okay, so any questions from you folks? Okay, I'll turn it back to Josie.
So again, I just want to thank you for being here. We've got some maps on the wall. We've got some water in the back there if you want to help yourself to that. The other thing I just want to end with is the borough has been great. They assigned liaison officers to us, and part of our job is to understand what your need is, and having local resources help us with that. Understanding, you know, the community is something that we really lean on quite a bit. So thank you, Pam and Aaron and Stefan, for all you've done, because it really does help us quite a bit. Thank you for being here this afternoon. And we'll have firefighters at the posts. We'll have you turn on the lights. And we have maps from both fires, some collage of pictures that we have listed here. Fire behavior will be over here if you want to ask more questions. Thank you so much.
I didn't see you put the map up, or I would have leaned on that.